As promised, I'm coming back to the knotted blanket stitch, the stitch that I did here on the edge of the fabric, the combination of French knots and the blanket stitch. And what I would like to do is make a little border here that can be a meadow, a flower meadow. And for that I've added a green color for the grass. But first we're going to make flowers, and therefore I've chosen two colors. So, as usual, I'm going to put my fabric in the hoop. And I think I want to make the border around here. And tighten the fabric. Now, if you're afraid that your line might be a bit wobbly, it can be a good thing to draw a line on the fabric with a pencil. And I'm starting with the orange thread first. Tying a knot. And I'm coming up at this side of the line. And I'm not starting with a straight stitch here. I'm going to start with an open row. And immediately I'm going to make the first knotted blanket stitch. And what you do is you take care of the knot first, the French knot, by wrapping the thread around the needle and let it go over the needle first. And then wrap it around it. And I do one wrap for this first one. And do it quite a bit away from where you came up, because now you have space. You see that the needle is now pointing to the left, and I'm going to flip it. So under the thread, pointing upwards and going down and coming up at the line. And making sure that the thread is behind the needle. Now this is very loose, so I'm going to pull. And I can pull quite a bit to make sure this is nice, tight line. And I place my left hand thumb on the thread and I pull through. And at the last moment I let go. And I have a stitch with a little knot at the end. Now I'm going to space them quite widely so that later the purple and the green stitches will fit in between. And now let's do 1, 2, 3 wraps. Flip the needle, and I see that I also keep my left hand thumb here on the thread to help a bit. And this one I'm going to make a bit taller. Come up on the line, thread behind the needle and pull until the thread is nice and smooth. You can pull quite hard. So make a few more with 2 wraps, for instance, and this one a bit closer to the other one. And again pull And sometimes when I've wrapped rather tightly, the pulling part can be difficult. So you need to help a bit. As you can see, this is not the easiest stitch, and it's a stitch that takes time, but the effect is very nice. And a bit wider apart and a tall one here. The irregularity in the spacing and the size of the stitches will help to create an organic look, because in a meadow the flowers don't stand in a straight order too. They're spread rather randomly around the meadow. And that is what you imitate by making variations in your spacing and in the size of the stitches. And that you can do intuitively. Let's do a third wrap and make a really big one here. Always coming up at a line, thread behind the needle and pulling. Because this is a double stitch, French knot plus blanket stitch, it makes sense that it's also a rather slow stitch. Let's make a small one close to the other one. Now nearly at the end of my line. And another one here. It's farther away. I have to leave enough space for the other colors. So that is something you have to keep in mind. This might look a bit sparse, but there's going to be other colors in between. And I'm not going down right outside of this stitch, but a little bit further away. So you get a suggestion of a bottom line. And I'm ready to finish the thread. And you see that on the back there are just a few rather large stitches. So tucking my thread under these stitches will not be very practical. So I'm going to tie two knots on top of each other around this stitch. And that should secure the thread enough to cut it off. So now for the purple color. And with that I'm going to make a second line of flowers. Well, suggestion of flowers, of course. And I'm going up not at the same spot as with the orange, a little bit farther. Doesn't matter much. And going to make my first purple stitch. And I want also now I want variation in spacing and size. So I think I'm going to make a rather big one here. And then also wrap a bit more. Coming up on the line just above the orange thread and pulling until I'm satisfied with how tight it is. and pulling the needle through. Another one here in between. And not exactly halfway, but a little bit closer to that one. Just a bit of variety in these stitches. A somewhat taller one here. And let's do another small one, also in this space. And then perhaps a longer one here. I'm not deciding anything beforehand, just following the line, seeing what is before me and deciding what might look good, just intuitively. And making sure I pull tightly. It's the nature of this stitch that it isn't extremely tight. Even how hard I pull, this part, you could say the stalk of the flower, is always a little bit loose, but that I feel it helps with the giving it an organic feel. And perhaps a last small one here. To finish this line. Oh, what did I do here? I'm going to do that again, because I don't know what I did, but it doesn't look very good. Flipping the needle, going down, coming up. And the last purple stitch, and going down somewhere here. And also tying the threads here on the back side with a little knot and cutting off the threads. So now it's time for the grasses, and grasses I'm not going to do with the knotted blanket stitch. And I've chosen green to do the grasses, a bit obvious of course, and it's your artistic freedom to give the grass any color that you like, but I thought that green was fitting here. I'm going to do normal blanket stitches, that is, I'm going to do them with different directions as I've done here. just like stems of grass. And here I can do a straight stitch as the first one. And just varying in size, spacing and direction to give the impressions of little tufts of grass in the meadow. A couple very close together, and then one like this. And the grasses can also cross each other. So for instance, this one is a bit diagonal, and I'm going to do a straight one on top of that. And coming up at the other side of the purple flower, because you know it's grasses. So grasses and flowers randomly strewn over the meadow. Just feeling my way, seeing what looks good. And here I'm doing one. This one's like this, and then now the next one I'm going to do in the other direction, diagonally, so that the stems of grass cross each other. Taller one here. And one here. So it's not completely random. I am aware of what's happening here and how it looks and where there's space for the grass stems. I made constant variations in the directionality, size and spacing of the stitches. And that will give the effect, the organic effect that I'm looking for. Oh, I've pricked myself. So busy, so it's so focused on what's happening here that I didn't notice the little drop of blood. I bet you experience that quite often too. Hazardous business stitching. I've pricked myself so many times, and I now know just to let the blood dry so that it doesn't touch the thread or the fabric. And I'm coming to the end of the line. And going to the back side. And now I've made so many stitches that I think I can safely tuck the tail under a series of stitches to fixate it. And there you have a little flower meadow border.